Hello everyone, thank you for joining me here on Creepy Enigma. If you are new, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss any upcoming stories. Now, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment and where are you from and what time you're watching. This helps YouTube recommend more creepy Enigma stories to you. Now let's begin. In 2023, I commenced subletting a compact dwelling for a couple of months when disagreements with my father necessitated my relocation. The primary tenant of the residence, whom I shall refer to as my landlord for simplicity, was experiencing personal difficulties that compelled him to vacate the property. The dwelling was a complete unit rental paid on a month-to-month basis, which proved ideal for my temporarily challenging circumstances. It comprised 2 levels, a small kitchen, a reasonably sized living area, and a single bedroom accessible by a short flight of stairs featuring a peculiar hatch-like door that needed to be opened to reach the upper bedroom. I had already resided there for a month and had by this point remitted the rent. For the second month, thus being fully settled, the dwelling was situated at the terminus of a dirt road, flanked by a few other similar-sized cabin-style houses. One, to my knowledge, remained unoccupied, as I never observed vehicles parked outside or lights illuminated within. Regarding the other residences, I had never formally met the occupants, but I was aware that people resided in them. My work often entailed 12-hour shifts, and upon returning home I would be utterly exhausted, typically proceeding directly to bed and watching television until I drifted off to sleep. This was one such evening. I arrived home, prepared a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and a protein shake as my late-night meal, then retired to bed. I invariably close the floor hatch door every night. I find it discomforting to have the entrance to my bedroom open at night. Something about it makes me feel exposed or vulnerable. However, this particular floor hatch door lacked a locking mechanism, as the dwelling was designed for a single occupant or a couple. I was watching television in bed when I heard it, a voice from the floor below inquiring, "Who is up there?" My heart instantly seized for a second as I bolted upright. The sound seemed to originate from within the house, but it was also plausible it came from outside. I seized the television remote to switch off the set. I then crawled over to peer out the circular window above the bed. I discerned no one outside, but it was also exceedingly dark. "Who is there?" I called out. The profound silence that followed prompted me to descend from the bed and place my hand on the door. Its handle, I lifted the door and looked down the staircase. I actually uttered my father, his name, contemplating if he might have visited. There was no reply. I walked downstairs. I was profoundly scared. I flicked on the first light switch. I encountered the living room, illuminated as I had expected. In the back of my mind, I still held on to the thought that no one was down there, attributing the sound to someone from outside. I activated the front exterior light and surveyed through the windows, confirming no one was present in the front. By this point, I was genuinely perplexed. I turned off the living room light and ascended the stairs back to my bedroom, closing the floor hatch door. I was now quite awake, so I reactivated the television. Not even 5 minutes later, I heard pounding on the bedroom door from below. The sound seemed indicative of anger, or as if intended to intimidate me if there had been any lingering doubt before this confirmed someone was inside the house. I left the television on this time and remained completely motionless, genuinely too terrified to move an inch. The most frightening aspect was that whoever was down there could effortlessly open the door, as there was no lock. I lay silently for approximately 20 minutes, and once I felt sufficiently comfortable to move, I searched for my phone. Of all times, it was not on my nightstand. I could not locate it. I might have left it downstairs. So I opened my bedroom door and cautiously peered down the stairs with the television screen, its constantly shifting light providing a faint glow I could see. A little way down the stairs towards the living room, I descended the stairs quietly, and upon reaching the bottom, instead of activating any lights, I sprinted out the back door barefoot and ran to the nearest neighbor, his house, where I knew people resided and saw their lights illuminated. I knocked repeatedly on their door, then noticed someone peering at me from the window adjacent to the door I was. Unsure how long they had been observing me, I yelled through the glass explaining what had transpired, identifying myself as his neighbor and stating I needed a phone to contact the police. He undoubtedly heard me, but he simply stared, an unsettling reaction that caused me to begin backing away from the door. As I realized he was not even responding to me, just eerily watching, I surveyed the road and observed no other houses in the distance with their lights on momentarily. A thought struck me. What if that individual had something to do with it? I returned to my rented dwelling through the back door, which was closed exactly as I had left it. I entered, locked it, and turned on every light in the tiny house. I searched not only for an intruder, but also for my phone downstairs, finally locating it in my car when I thought to look there. I had been so tired earlier that I had left it in the center console. I went back inside. The television was still on in the bedroom. I climbed the stairs, and upon reaching the top, I saw someone sitting on my bed staring at the television. It was a man. I screamed, and he slowly turned his head to look at me, and before I could perceive anything else, I rushed back down the stairs and outside. Now with my phone, I dialed emergency services. I sat in my locked car observing the house while on the phone with emergency services, and I saw someone walking past the backyard of the house, disappearing into the woods. I informed the operator of this, and when a police car arrived, the officer checked the house and the upstairs room. After I recounted seeing someone, most likely the intruder, walk away into the woods, he inquired if I had any other places to stay that night. So I swallowed my pride and returned to my father, his house, for the night. After packing some of my essential belongings, I returned to the house the next day and stayed another night, then collected the remainder of my belongings. Fortunately, the landlord agreed to refund some of my money. He inquired about the man, his appearance, and after that he posed no further questions, which struck me as quite suspicious. Something was unusual in that entire situation. From that eerie neighbor ignoring me to the landlord, his sudden urgent need to move out, to someone attempting to break into the house. Perhaps it is all connected, or perhaps I am simply overthinking it. It was a Tuesday evening around 11 p.m. in 2013, and I was traversing a poorly lit street on my route home from work. My vehicle had been undergoing repairs, compelling me to walk 3 miles home each day. The journey typically lasted just under an hour, ensuring I arrived home before midnight. I reside in a small community in southern Everglade, where after 10 p.m. vehicular traffic is sparse. The only cars one usually encounters are freight haulers bound for Metropolis. I was approximately a mile into my walk when I turned onto a dirt track. My house was situated off the main routes, necessitating passage through several such forested dirt tracks to reach it. As I made the turn, I detected the distant sound of an engine steadily drawing nearer. I observed about a quarter of a mile down the stretch of road I had just left a van moving at a very slow pace with its lights extinguished. Initially, this did not strike me as unusual. In my town, there was a rather inexpensive dealership selling used vehicles, including vans, often with malfunctioning components like broken headlights. Therefore, I simply assumed this individual was one of their patrons. I continued along the side road with the van still proceeding slowly down the main road. Approximately 5 seconds later, I startled when I heard the van, its engine roar to life, and it accelerated rapidly. Now, with its headlights illuminated, I was taken aback but not yet concerned. This changed, however, as the van approached the turnoff for the side road. Roughly 500 feet from the turn, the van once again extinguished its lights and decelerated. Now, I was genuinely unnerved. I did not wish to appear alarmed, so I merely quickened my pace down the road. I constantly glanced behind me to ascertain if I was being followed. Then my suspicions materialized into reality as I observed the van making the turn onto the dirt track I was on. I was only about 500 feet from the van, so I began to walk considerably faster. I resisted the urge to look back, but I did just to be safe. And what I witnessed terrified every fiber of my being. I saw the van stationary with both the passenger and driver, his doors ajar. At this point, I ran for my life down the dirt track. I heard what I am certain was a gunshot not far away, and I genuinely believed this was how my life would end. I made a swift turn into the surrounding forest and concealed myself behind a large rock. I heard what sounded like a middle-aged man, not far away, utter, "I think she went into the woods." Then, to my horror, what sounded like 3 young girls with one of them responding, "Okay, sir, I will see if we can find her now." I was no longer merely fearing for my life. I was dreading being forced into whatever depraved group this was. I covered my mouth desperately, trying not to emit any sound, when I heard the man declare, "Whoever finds her does not have to drink the blood tonight." A million thoughts raced through my mind. Is this some sort of occult collective? Are these girls abducted? Will I become one of them? I spent what felt like an eternity crouched behind the rock, terrified by every sound I perceived. Then, to my profound relief, I heard the distinct sound of a law enforcement siren nearby. I remained in my hiding spot just to be safe. When I mustered the courage to peer from behind the rock, I saw red and blue flashing lights directly outside the forest. I dashed out, screaming for assistance, and the officers approached me, asking, "Are you aware of this body?" I was bewildered and responded, "What body?" Then, in front of the patrol car, I beheld the most gruesome sight I will ever witness. What appeared to be a naked young woman, disemboweled with blood everywhere. There was no van in sight. I then recounted everything to the officers: the vehicle, the man, the girls who had to drink the blood. The officers stated they would investigate and were kind enough to drive me home that night. When I could not sleep, I looked out my window to see the same van from before driving slowly without its lights on down my street. This time I was smart and recorded the license plate number. I immediately called the police and reported what I saw, providing the license plate number as expected. When the officers arrived, the van was long gone. But what they subsequently informed me horrifies me to this very day. The officers said, "We checked the license plate number. It is a plate registered in the state of Dakota. But the thing is, we checked with other precincts around the country, and they have received reports tonight of a suspicious van with that same license plate. One in Viridian, one in Nevada, one in Arctica, and one in Texia." They concluded, "We will call you if we get any more information." The officers departed, and I never received a call. I do not generally subscribe to paranormal beliefs, so my best conjecture is that it was some form of cult that utilized fabricated license plates to perpetrate their vile acts across the country. But I suppose I will never truly know. I have since relocated from Everglen. Now I make it a point that whenever I observe something suspicious, I immediately flee. My spouse Hilara and I reside in a typical suburban area. We hold ordinary jobs, lead conventional lives, and live alongside ordinary neighbors. We embody what one might term the standard contemporary lifestyle, largely influenced by the values our parents instilled. The very act of me committing this narrative to paper is noteworthy, as I am not a writer. The last time I composed something of this length was for a college assignment. However, an incident occurred not long ago that defies explanation, and it continues to unsettle us to this very day. Hilara and I experienced a normal day, and after work, we decided to dine out for a change. We returned home around 9 p.m. We do not typically remain awake very late on work nights, so by 9:30 p.m. we were brushing our teeth, preparing for bed. By 10 p.m. we were settled in bed, and we usually extinguish the lights by 11 p.m. We either engage in reading or watch our preferred television program. This particular night we were watching our show when the telephone rang. Hilara cautioned me not to answer it, asserting that anyone calling at this hour could not be delivering favorable news. I concurred with her sentiment, but for that very reason stated I should answer it in case of an emergency. So, I reached for the landline phone situated next to the bed to pick it up, but it ceased ringing before I could actually lift the receiver. That antique landline was rather unreliable. The moment a call ended, the caller ID would vanish, and there was no mechanism to review the call history. Oh, well, wrong number, I thought. However, a few minutes later, the telephone rang again. I seized the phone and observed the screen. It displayed unknown number. Both Ilara and I found this unusual, especially after 10:00 p.m. I hold the belief that there is a generally accepted cutoff time for phone calls, and that is after 9:00 p.m. I did not answer the phone, but immediately after it stopped ringing, it rang once more. Suddenly it felt like a genuine emergency, like heaven forbid something had befallen a relative, so I answered in haste. On the other end it was the voice of my neighbor Arthur. He inquired if I was aware of the man standing outside my house. "What are you talking about?" I asked. He instructed me to go outside and then abruptly hung up. I found the abruptness of his hang-up exceptionally bizarre. Ilara, her expression when I relayed Arthur his words, was one of apprehension. "Don't go out there," she urged. I replied, "I am just going to look out the window." I descended the stairs and slightly parted the curtain to peer out onto the front lawn. There was definitively no one standing. Outside, I opened the front door, then the storm door, and stepped onto the front stoop. I looked around and into the bushes directly in front of the house. Nobody. At this point, I felt a little annoyed at the idea that Arthur would prank call us so late on a work night, and it also felt somewhat out of character for him to do something like that. I returned to bed and informed Ilara that no one was outside and Arthur was likely playing a trick on us. She was just as confused by this as I was. It simply felt odd. She advised me to call him, and so I did, but it rang and went straight to voicemail. I left a message saying, "Hey Arthur, what was that call about? Give me a call back." Then the phone rang. It displayed unknown caller again. I picked up and it was Arthur once more. Before I could even utter a word, he commanded, "Go outside there. Is someone standing outside your house?" He spoke in a calm, slow voice, then hung up. I got up and declared aloud, "All right, what on earth is going on?" I instructed Ilara to wait there. I went downstairs and back to the window. I peered through the curtain, and this time I saw someone standing precisely at the end of our walkway where it met the sidewalk. He wore a hood over his head, effectively shrouding his face in mere darkness. I was genuinely shaken. I opened my door and addressed him from outside, "Can I help you?" The man simply stood motionless. I threatened him with contacting the police. Then the house phone rang again. I closed the front door and went to the kitchen phone, and this time noticed the caller ID displayed my neighbor Arthur. His number I picked up, and Arthur said in a much more normal voice, "Hey, I just got your voicemail. What was that about? I did not call you." I was so bewildered I swore to him he had just called me twice, telling me about a man outside my house. He sounded even more confused than I was. Then moments later he stated he did not see anyone outside my house. I demanded, "Arthur, tell me right now if this was a joke," warning that if I discovered it was not, we would have a problem. Arthur insisted he was telling the truth and that he was not the type of immature prankster. He was a very unassuming, respectful person. I had to put him on speaker so Ilara could confirm that I was not losing my mind, and that we had indeed received 2 calls from someone who sounded just like him. He did the same, putting his wife on the phone as well, to vouch for him. In the end, what could anyone truly say except that it sounded like someone was playing a trick on us? Eventually we ended the call, but I was no less horrified than I was before. I had to go back downstairs one more time to hang up the downstairs phone, and so I looked outside one more time. The man was still no longer there. None of us could ever decipher this inexplicable situation.